You've heard the threat. It's like a plot from science fiction.
Inhuman, relentless, unstoppable.
Can you stop it?
I don't know.
That is from The Terminator, by the way, a movie from 1984 with a really long trailer in which artificial intelligence has come from the future like some kind of monster, or Arnold Schwarzenegger, to destroy us.
They cannot make things like that yet.
Not yet. Not for about 40 years.
Are you saying it's from the future?
And there have been a lot of headlines in present day that have taken on tones kind of like this, speculating on the threat of robots in the form of things like artificial intelligence and automation in the workplace, as their purposes in our lives multiply like the ripples in Arnold Schwarzenegger's biceps. Okay, was that too much? Maybe that was too much. This is What's Next ATL, a podcast where we're not afraid of no robots, or, as I usually say, a podcast powered by the Atlanta Regional Commission, where we explore the big new ideas shaping Metro Atlanta. I'm Kate Sweeney. And today, we'll hear about how artificial intelligence and other kinds of automation are already deeply enmeshed in our lives, and both the challenges and very real opportunities automation poses. It turns out this story is not just a tech geek thing. Rather, it touches on things like transportation, housing, and equity, all key issues in the question of how to build the communities we want. Stick around. Automation. We're hearing so much about it these days. Since I started work on this episode, I swear approximately 2 billion internet articles on automation have come out. Yes, that's right, 2 billion. That's scientific. But very few of those articles actually do much to explain what's meant by the term. So let's ask an expert.
Automation is, I think it covers a number of things.
This is Stuart Andreason with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta.
I run a center that we have here called the Center for Workforce and Economic Opportunity.
The center is devoted to understanding what changes in the economy mean for workers, meaning all of us, as well as helping all economic players think about how they prepare people for the workforce. So he's devoted time to getting to know automation and the many forms it takes in our lives.
It could be physical automation. You could think of a manufacturing line or a car assembly line where there's now a robot arm that helps do something that someone used to do. It helps turn a wrench or screw in a screw. But there's also like process automation or thinking automation, like artificial intelligence.
Consider the fact that our email apps have started to read our emails and suggest phrases with which we might respond. Andreason says that's artificial intelligence, a form of automation, which, while it may give some of us the heebie-jeebies, also arguably makes our lives simpler. But why are we hearing so much about it now? I mean, as it turns out, automated technology isn't anything new. In fact, it's woven into humanity's long history of technological change.
You can go back to the Industrial Revolution. We became much more productive. But over the long term, we are beginning to advance in our innovation rapidly. So that's what's different about today, is that we're going through cycles where something feels new and then old much more quickly.
Take, for example, an item that you're probably carrying around right now. A decade ago, you didn't use your cell phone to listen to podcasts, much less surf the internet, write silly notes to friends, sign up for your class at the gym, or ensure your home security system. And yet, you can do all these things and more today, with new capabilities coming out and old ones becoming obsolete every single minute. And it's not just phones. As technology gets smarter and smarter, it takes less and less time for new innovations to spring forward.
And it's just this acceleration. It's like, how do we continue to get twice as fast and twice as fast? And our ability to be agile is the thing that I think really requires us to think outside the box.
Because as that pace keeps up and even intensifies, he says, the effect on our jobs is also going to intensify, leading to the billion-dollar question: how much does automation actually threaten our jobs today and down the road?
Well, to me, one of the first things to think about is the level of education that someone has, which is one of the ways that some people have really tried to measure how disrupted their job might be. And I wanted to say disrupted, not necessarily lost. I think a lot of people will see their jobs change, and we can probably all look back and think about how our jobs have changed over the last 5 years, 10 years. Think about like a spreadsheet.
Stuart Andreason says when spreadsheet programs for personal computers became common,
Think back to the 80s.
people saw them as a major likely threat to analysts, people whose jobs it had been to do the things our computer spreadsheet programs do today. You know, tallying up complex columns of numbers. Instead, this new automation technology of the spreadsheet program made analysts' jobs even more complex, requiring more training, and in the end, the demand for analysts went up. So that's the best case scenario for automation tech in the workplace. Cases in which, with a little more training, people's jobs become a little more complex and higher paying. But there are other scenarios too. A 2017 study from the University of Oxford found 63% of all sales jobs to be threatened by automation. Not surprising in this day of, well, using our phones to buy things online instead of going to stores. And this risks becoming a real issue in Metro Atlanta, where thousands of people are employed in retail sales. And it's more than just retail. Our region is one of the nation's logistical hubs, and people who work in this sector, like truck drivers and warehouse workers, have already begun to feel automation's effects. In all, 62% of the region's jobs are in occupations considered to be at medium or high risk of automation. Now, that 62% puts us in line with most metro areas. However, places like Boston and Denver, which have both higher levels of educational attainment and higher concentrations of tech industry jobs, also have larger shares of low-risk jobs. Andreason says there's an equitable way to address this challenge. It involves a term we've likely heard before, looked at a little differently. It's lifelong learning. And no, he's not talking about evening pottery classes when he uses it. He's talking about the opportunity for all of us to constantly sharpen our professional skills.
We need to think about lifelong learning as not something that we're just talking about for people in executive and professional levels, but on the front lines to the C-suite and everything in between. And that's not something we've done really, really well. You typically think, we'll go and take a class every now and then. But that's actually a real challenge for a lot of people. Imagine someone whose day job is being a professional driver. They drive a delivery route or something like that. They don't have a lot of time in the day to just go and sit down.
So when you said that we haven't done that very well, are you just talking about that sort of lack of, I guess, nimbleness and sort of creativity with what that learning might look like?
Yeah. And so there's a lot of versions of this, right? So let's say that you happen to need a new credential for the job that you're going to. We often deliver education through what you would think of as like a credit hour format. You sign up and you get credit based on being in class for 3 hours.
He says that instead, we need more competency-based education, in which someone is able to learn only the 1 or 2 new critical skills they need when they need it.
The classes that we're talking about, we are literally talking about doing them 24/7.
Like, well, this model.
If they need to be done on Easter Sunday, Christmas Day, we will do them on those days going forward. It's truly a customer-focused program going forward.
Yeah.
These are the voices of Dave Byrne and Irvin Clark. Byrne's the VP of Economic Development for Newton County, and Clark's the VP of Economic Development at Georgia Piedmont Technical College. The school's pioneering a new program called the Rockwell Automation Academy that does training for workers to keep up with advances in automation in a new way. It's competency-based, like Andreason's talking about. There are 12 students here in the classroom today at Piedmont Tech, all people who work at manufacturing plants across North Georgia. And they're sitting at desks, typing away on keyboards that are hooked up to these small black boards that kind of look like internet routers covered in blinking lights. So if you're wondering what the sound of manufacturing is in this day and age, in some cases, it's quiet. I mean, we walked in here and you hear manufacturing and you come in here and there are all these folks on laptop computers sort of clicking away, which is not maybe what It's not what I expected.
No, definitely not. Now that with automated manufacturing, so there's a computer interface to everything, touch screens, all that, so it's evolved quickly over the years.
That's Brian Sexton, the guy who's showing me around. Sexton directs advanced manufacturing at the school, and he explains to me that because of automation, manufacturing's not all heavy equipment and loud machinery these days. In this case, by learning to use these small arrays I mentioned, which are basically sets of programmable on and off switches for a plant, these workers are upgrading their skills and their pay grades in a lot of cases. And this coming in, learning a new skill, and getting right back to work, that is the agility that Stuart Andreason was talking about. Here at this Piedmont Tech program, manufacturing plants let the school know which new technology their workers need to learn. The school, in turn, creates a custom curriculum. The workers don't have to take a lot of time off from their jobs, and the demand for this kind of training model is high. Irvin Clark says that while they were developing the program, they heard from manufacturing companies all the time.
They have already told us they are waiting for this. They cannot wait because they know that they have a lot of employees that they want to upgrade, and they're eager to get it done.
And as Andreason said, the need for lifelong learning isn't limited to classes outside the workplace. It might be on-the-job learning, shadowing a manager to train on some new process or software. The key, he says, is to remain nimble. In this age when technology is changing fast and will only change faster as time goes on, no one can afford to think they're going to set and forget their education. And the region's workforce agencies are actually all over this. These are the agencies whose job it is to make sure Metro Atlanta builds and maintains a skilled labor force. Besides advocating for programs like the one at Piedmont Tech, they have all kinds of free job training for people who want to upgrade their skills or change careers. And you can learn more about that on the page for this episode at our website. When we return, the connection between where you live and the effect automation may have on your life. That's after the break. Hey there. Last week, as we thought about creating the cities and neighborhoods we want, we asked you how long you plan to stay in your current Metro Atlanta neighborhood. Here's what you had to say. 31% of you said you plan to move soon. Just 23% of you said you'll stay for the foreseeable future, but nothing is set in stone. And 46% of you say you're here to stay. They will bury you in your Atlanta United scarf.
ATL, we are here. Whoa. ATL, we are here.
This week, as we think about creating the jobs we want, here's our question. How much do you think your job will be affected by automation over the next decade? Let us know at the usual spot, the page for this episode at whatsnextatl.org/podcast. That's where you'll find this quiz question, and we'll share your responses next week. Thanks to everyone who responded to our call for reviews on Apple Podcasts. The t-shirts are in the mail. We hope you'll photograph yourselves wearing them around town, post them on social. Remember, you can tag us at Atlanta Regional. And you can still hit us up with a nice review, thanks to everyone who's able to take the time to do so. We're back. So far, we've found out the ways, large and small, in which all of us have jobs that are likely affected by automation to some degree, no matter what we do for a living. And we found out how the ways we learn and relearn job skills need to be more nimble as the 21st century marches on. But what about those whose jobs are going away completely? We pick up our conversation with Stuart Andreason.
If we're wondering who's going to be disrupted to the point of losing a job because of tech change, it's probably going to be workers with lower levels of education. So we need to take that really seriously.
We know that certain fields and folks with lower education levels are most at risk. But he says it's not just who you are in terms of your education and what you do, but also where you are.
So let's just take Metro Atlanta. If you're in the big business areas, we've got a pretty diversified economy. And if one industry takes a turn or goes through a major change, it's pretty diversified. You've got an easier job search. But let's say that you're in one of our slightly more peripheral counties. You're not outside of Metro Atlanta. You're just a little bit further away. Well, what if the job that you've been working at does change to some degree? And then your next opportunities on, let's say just the other side of the perimeter. Is this a housing problem for you and you've got to move? Is it a transportation problem for you?
These questions are all complicated by factors like how time-consuming it may be for someone to get from home to work and back. How many times do they have to change buses? How expensive is the gas? So transportation and housing become issues, he says, must be addressed, not least because they're all connected to the severity of the effect automation may have in a region where it is already very difficult to move up the income ladder. Because technological disruptions, they're going to keep coming.
Let's say that one of those big changes comes, and my guess is that something will come, but it'll be in something that we don't do well to predict. It'll be something brand new.
Scooters.
Exactly, yeah, all over the place. That'd be an interesting podcast. But so let's say that it happens, right? And we need to also be able to be agile, but we need to be agile and big.
As a 2019 report from the Southern Regional Education Board says, the question isn't whether there will be enough jobs in the future, but whether there will be enough skilled workers to fill them. It's like Irvin Clark at Georgia Piedmont Tech said. Companies, they're waiting for people to be trained for these middle-skill jobs. They need those skilled workers.
And you can think about this in a lot of different ways. If you're running a business, you've got to continue to innovate. If you're a worker, you've got to continue to adapt. If you're an educational institution or workforce development agency, you can't let a program get set in stone. It's a lot to get stuff started, but you can't stop there because what workers need and what businesses need is going to change. If we're imagining that it's accelerating, it means we're going to need to change more rather than less.
And so it would seem the real question isn't, will robots take our jobs? It's, can we put the mechanisms in place to educate people fast enough as our robot systems get more sophisticated? Because let's face it, we love the robots. We love the robots that help us buy plane tickets online or that help advance our lives in other ways, large and small. So Andreason says, let's think big.
What if we spent some time now and acted proactively to think about how do we work with people that are going to be going through those transitions, make them more productive? If we get them into the story of the analyst who now has a spreadsheet in the internet and is much more productive, we're talking about having greatly enhanced their productivity, which typically means their income. So it's an unfinished story and there's a great opportunity here. And so that's where I think the hope really exists.
That's Stuart Andreason with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta's Center for Workforce and Economic Opportunity. We have links to Metro Atlanta programs to help you to level up your own job skills. We're talking everything from resume writing to interview coaching to, in some cases, free training and job placement. You can find all of that on the page for this episode. That's what'snextatl.org/podcast. Well, we've come down to it, folks. Next week's the final episode of our Creating the Communities We Want series. We've talked about the big stuff, our regional community, our cities, our neighborhoods, and workplaces. Next week we ask, how small can you go? 7 steps from one end to the other.
No, not for me. I would get tired of being in this space with just myself.
Then you go outside.
Tiny houses, accessory dwelling units, and how they could help us solve our housing affordability challenge while helping us to meet new neighbors. That's next week in our final episode of Season 2. People have been telling us What's Next ATL is a great crash course in community here in Metro Atlanta. So if you're enjoying the show, please share it with a friend and rate and review us on Apple's podcast app. That's about it for this week. See ya.
Blackness isn't just about race. I'm Deneen Milner, and I'm a New York Times bestselling author. On my podcast, Speakeasy with Deneen, I dive into the beauty and humanity of Blackness with people like writer Tayari Jones, journalist Demetria Lucas, and rapper Killer Mike. Listen to Speakeasy with Deneen from Georgia Public Broadcasting. Subscribe for free at gpb.org/podcasts or on your favorite podcast app.